The sky above Crixus 7 hung, like a bruised membrane, its purple-gray clouds pulsing with electromagnetic disturbances. Below this tumultuous ceiling stretched the infamous swamplands that covered nearly 80% of the planet's surface, a vast expanse of bubbling mud pools, twisted vegetation, and toxic mist that could corrode both metal and flesh alike. The high gravity of this distant world made every step laborious, every breath a conscious effort. Sergeant Elena Reyes adjusted her exo-assist frame and squinted through the billowing fog. As the only human warrior in the Galactic Alliance strike team, she stood out among her alien companions, not just for her comparative physical frailty, but for her seemingly primitive approach to warfare. While her teammates relied on advanced neural interfaces and gravitational manipulation, Elena's contribution was her extensive knowledge of ecological adaptation and survival techniques, skills considered archaic by most spacefaring species. "Movement ahead, Captain," she reported, keeping her voice steady despite the acidic air burning her throat. The exo-frame helped compensate for Crixus 7's punishing gravity, but nothing could fully protect against the planet's toxic atmosphere. Her environmental suit filters would need replacement within hours. Captain Thorin, a towering Herak warrior with crystalline plating where skin would be on a human, acknowledged her report with a curt nod. His species valued efficiency above all else, and his interactions with Elena had been minimal since her last-minute assignment to the team 3 standard weeks ago. "Maintain formation," Thorin commanded, his voice resonating through the neural communication network that linked the diverse soldiers. "We approach the extraction point in approximately 2 kilometers. The magnetic storm should provide adequate cover for our advance." Elena nodded, though she knew the gesture was unnecessary. The 26 members of the strike force moved with practiced precision through the swamp, their formation accounting for the various strengths and weaknesses of each species represented. The tank-like Herak warriors at the perimeter, the nimble Altari scouts skimming just above the surface, and the multi-limbed Yadari engineers monitoring the array of technological defenses that kept the team safe from Crixus 7's hostile environment. This was the future of warfare in the year 2783, coordinated multi-species operations against threats that endangered all sentient life in the known galaxy. The current mission was a critical data extraction from an abandoned research facility where early warning signals had been detected regarding the Void Convergence, a mysterious cosmic phenomenon consuming entire star systems at the galaxy's edge. Elena had been drafted into the Alliance just months prior, when ecological warfare had unexpectedly become crucial in the ongoing conflict. Her expertise in extreme environment adaptation had earned her a reluctant place among beings whose civilizations had reached the stars thousands of years before humans had mastered fire. "Atmospheric disruption increasing," announced Mur, the Altari technology specialist, whose translucent skin rippled with bioluminescent data patterns. Magnetic density rising to critical levels. Elena felt the change before the sensors confirmed it. A heaviness in the air, a metallic taste seeping through her mask's filters. Years of field experience on Earth's most inhospitable environments had honed her senses to detect subtle environmental shifts. "Something's wrong," she said, breaking protocol by speaking aloud rather than through the neural network. "This isn't a standard magnetic storm." Captain Thoran turned toward her, crystalline features impossible to read. "Explain your assessment, Sergeant." Before Elena could respond, the swamp around them erupted in a brilliant display of electrical activity. Arcs of energy leaped from puddle to puddle, creating an intricate web of light that momentarily transformed the dreary landscape into a dazzling spectacle. Then came the silence. Every piece of Alliance technology simultaneously deactivated. Gravitational stabilizers, communication arrays, navigation systems, all dead. The Altari scouts, suddenly without their levitation tech, splashed unceremoniously into the murky water. Yadari engineers frantically tried to reboot their diagnostic tools, their multiple appendages working feverishly over now useless equipment. Even Elena's exoframe locked into rigid immobility, nearly toppling her forward into the caustic mud. "Status report," Thoran demanded, his natural crystalline biology making him one of the few still fully mobile. No one responded through the neural network, because there was no neural network anymore. The magnetic storm had fried every piece of Alliance technology, leaving the strike team stranded in the middle of Crixus 7's deadliest swampland. Elena manually disengaged her exoframe's joints, allowing herself limited movement despite the crushing gravity. "EMP!" she called out, her voice sounding small without the communication amplifiers. "Some kind of electromagnetic pulse, probably triggered by our passage through this sector." Panic spread through the ranks. The Altari, evolved on a low-gravity world, could barely move under Crixus 7's natural pull without their tech. The Yadari, despite their multiple limbs, were sinking rapidly into the soft mud that their hover platforms had previously kept them above. "We need to regroup on solid ground," Elena suggested, pointing toward a distant ridge that rose slightly above the swamp surface. Captain Thoran's crystalline features shifted in what Elena had learned to recognize as contemplation. "Acceptable temporary solution. All units. Physical movement to the designated location." The next hour was a grueling testament to the physical diversity of the Alliance forces. Species that had relied entirely on technological assistance now struggled through the viscous terrain. The Herak warriors, naturally adapted to high-gravity environments, helped drag the nearly immobile Altari through the muck. The Yadari, once they had extracted themselves from the sucking mud, used their multiple limbs to assist others. Elena moved with practiced efficiency. Her human body, the product of evolution on a world that many Alliance species considered brutally hostile, proving surprisingly capable even without technological enhancement. The irony wasn't lost on her. Humanity's primitive physiology, adapted through millions of years of survival on Earth's varied landscapes, had prepared her for precisely this situation. By the time they reached the relative safety of the ridge, the reality of their situation had become painfully clear. Without functioning technology, they were cut off from their extraction vessel, unable to communicate with Alliance command, and exposed to Crixus 7's increasingly toxic atmosphere as their environmental protection systems gradually failed. "Our options are limited," Captain Thoran announced to the assembled team, his voice carrying naturally across the ridge. "We must either repair our technology or find alternative means to reach the extraction point before atmospheric exposure becomes lethal." The Yadari engineer Vox, whose species prided themselves on technological mastery, spread his 4 upper limbs in a gesture of helplessness. "The magnetic surge has fused most circuitry. Even if we could salvage components, the ambient electromagnetic field would render them useless again within minutes." A ripple of dismay spread through the gathered soldiers. Without their technology, most Alliance species were severely handicapped on this hostile world. Elena studied the surrounding landscape, noting the patterns in the swamp's surface. Small debris, twisted vegetation, hollow shells of native creatures, fragments of unknown materials, drifted slowly but consistently in one direction, suggesting an underlying current. "We don't need technology," she said, loudly enough to draw attention. "We need to adapt." Captain Thoran turned his crystalline gaze toward her. "Explain, Sergeant." Elena pointed toward the drifting debris. "There's a current moving beneath the surface, following a consistent path toward the northwest, roughly in the direction of our extraction point. The swamp has channels of more solid terrain beneath it." "How does this observation assist our situation?" asked Mur, the Altari specialist whose translucent form trembled under the strain of Crixus 7's gravity. Elena gestured toward the dense vegetation surrounding the ridge. "Those trees, they're saturated with natural oils that repel the swamp's acidity. And those vines are incredibly resilient, able to withstand both the caustic environment and significant tensile stress. She saw only blank stares from her alien companions. "We build a floating bridge," Elena explained. "Cut down the acid-resistant trees, bind them together with the vines, and create a pathway that follows the natural current toward the extraction point." A moment of silence followed her suggestion, broken by a sound Elena had never heard before. A Herrick laugh, a grating, crystalline sound like breaking glass. "Primitive technology," Captain Thorin said, the derision evident despite his alien vocal patterns. "You suggest we abandon the advanced methodologies of 6 spacefaring civilizations in favor of floating on logs?" Elena stood her ground. "I suggest we use what's available to solve our current problem, unless anyone has a better alternative." The silence that followed was answer enough. "Very well," Thoran conceded reluctantly. "Sergeant Reyes will coordinate this primitive solution. All units will comply with her instructions, while engineering teams continue attempting to restore our technology." The next few hours revealed the vast gulf between species that had evolved on different worlds. Tasks that would have been intuitive to any human child, gathering materials, testing their buoyancy, creating simple bindings, were completely foreign concepts to beings whose civilizations had long since transcended such basic survival skills. Elena organized the effort as efficiently as possible, assigning tasks based on physical capabilities rather than specialized training. The Herrick warriors, with their incredible strength, harvested the acid-resistant trees. The nimble-fingered Yadari, once shown the technique, proved adept at weaving the vines into sturdy bindings. Even the Altari, despite their physical limitations in the high gravity, contributed by using their heightened senses to identify the strongest materials. Progress was slow and fraught with setbacks. The caustic mist grew thicker as the day wore on, forcing frequent breaks as environmental suits needed maintenance and makeshift repairs. Several times, sections of the developing bridge collapsed into the swamp, necessitating time-consuming rebuilding. Worse, the toxic atmosphere was beginning to affect the team. Several soldiers showed symptoms of exposure, disorientation, respiratory distress, deteriorating motor control. As twilight approached, a dangerous time on Crixus 7 when predatory creatures became more active, Elena surveyed their progress with growing concern. The floating bridge extended nearly a kilometer into the swamp, following the underwater current she'd identified. But they still had significant distance to cover before reaching the extraction point. "We need to accelerate construction," she told Captain Thoran, who had been observing the operation with stoic silence. "The atmospheric toxicity is increasing with nightfall, and several team members are showing advanced symptoms of exposure." Thoran's crystalline form reflected the dim light in fractured patterns. "Engineer Vox reports no progress in restoring our technology. Your bridge appears to be our only viable option." It was as close to approval as she was likely to get from the Herrick captain. "Then, I need more workers on the forward section," Elena pressed. "We can complete enough of the bridge to reach the extraction point by morning if we maintain continuous construction through the night." "Continuous construction in darkness?" Thorin questioned. "The risk of predator attack increases by 73% after sundown. And the risk of atmospheric poisoning increases by nearly 100% if we remain stationary," Elena countered. "We need to keep moving." After a moment's consideration, Thorin nodded. "Your assessment is logical. I will assign additional warriors to the construction team and establish a defensive perimeter." Through the long night, the Alliance strike team worked tirelessly under Elena's direction. The floating bridge grew steadily longer, extending further into the swamp toward their destination. Periodic attacks by indigenous predators, sightless, amphibious creatures attracted to movement, were repelled by the Herrick warriors, though not without casualties. 2 soldiers were lost to the creatures' acidic attacks, their bodies dissolved beyond recovery in the caustic mud. By dawn, exhaustion had claimed many of the team. Those still capable of movement continued the work, driven by the increasingly urgent need to reach the extraction point before their environmental protection failed completely. The bridge now stretched nearly 2 kilometers into the swamp, with perhaps another kilometer remaining to their destination. Elena, who had worked continuously through the night, felt the burning in her lungs that signaled filter failure in her breathing apparatus. Her vision blurred occasionally, a symptom of toxic exposure that she fought to conceal from the others. As the nominal leader of this desperate endeavor, she couldn't afford to show weakness. "Status report," she requested of Mur, who had been monitoring the bridge's structural integrity. The Altari's translucent skin had taken on a worrying grayish tinge, but his voice remained steady. "The forward sections are holding, but the binding agent on the middle segment shows signs of degradation. The current has strengthened overnight, creating additional stress on the structure." Elena nodded, squinting toward the distant extraction point barely visible through the morning mist. "We need to reinforce the middle section before attempting a full crossing." As she spoke, a concerning sound reached them, the creaking protest of vines under excessive strain. The underwater current, previously a gentle flow guiding their construction, had inexplicably accelerated, creating powerful eddies that pulled at the floating logs. "Something's changing in the swamp," Elena warned, feeling the vibration through the logs beneath her feet. "The current pattern is shifting." Before anyone could respond, a section of the bridge about halfway along its length suddenly twisted, the logs rotating against their bindings as a powerful underwater surge caught them broadside. Several Yadari engineers working on that section scrambled for handholds, their multiple limbs grasping desperately at the slippery surfaces. "Structural failure imminent," Mur called out, his sensory organs detecting stresses invisible to others. Elena made a split-second decision. "Everyone back to the ridge! Clear the bridge now!" Most of the team obeyed instantly, retreating toward the relative safety of solid ground. But Elena saw that the Yadari engineers were trapped on the failing section, unable to reach either end of the bridge before collapse. Without hesitation, she moved forward, fighting against the flow of retreating soldiers. "I need vine reinforcements," she called out, grabbing coils of the flexible material from a nearby supply pile. Captain Thoran intercepted her. "The bridge is failing. Retreat is the logical action." "Not without our people," Elena responded, pushing past him. She ran along the floating pathway, feeling each log shift and roll beneath her feet as the current battered the structure. The middle section had begun to buckle, creating a dangerous V-shape where the Yadari engineers clung precariously to the wildly moving logs. Reaching the edge of the stable section, Elena secured one end of her vine coil to a firmly anchored log, then tied the other end around her waist. The gap between her position and the stranded engineers widened as more logs twisted out of alignment. "Hold on!" she shouted to the Yadari, measuring the distance. At least 3 meters of violently churning swamp separated her from the nearest engineer. Taking a deep breath that burned her failing lungs, Elena leaped across the gap, landing hard on a partially submerged log. The impact nearly knocked her into the caustic swamp, but she maintained her balance through sheer determination, moving quickly before the log could roll. She secured another length of vine as a handhold for the stranded engineers. "Grab on and pull yourselves across," she instructed, fighting to maintain her position as the current intensified. One by one, the Yadari engineers used their multiple limbs to traverse the makeshift lifeline, crossing the dangerous gap to the more stable section of the bridge. As the last engineer reached safety, a violent surge in the current tore away the entire middle section of the bridge, leaving Elena stranded on a single log, rapidly being pulled into a newly formed whirlpool. From the stable end of the bridge, Captain Thoran watched the human sergeant fighting to maintain her position. Without functioning technology, there was no way to assist her from this distance. "Sergeant Reyes cannot be recovered," he announced to the team. We must preserve our remaining resources and attempt to... He was interrupted by Mur, the Altari specialist. She's signaling to us. Indeed. Elena was gesturing frantically from her precarious position, pointing not toward the ridge, but toward the distant extraction point. Even as her log spun in the growing vortex, she was indicating that they should continue forward, not retreat. Impossible, Thoran stated. The bridge is severed. Forward progress cannot be maintained. But Engineer Vox had moved to the edge of the remaining bridge section. His multiple eyes focused intently on Elena's position. The current, he said suddenly. The vortex pattern. It's not random. The flow is accelerating toward our destination. Thoran studied the swamp's surface, noting the debris now moving much more rapidly in the direction of the extraction point. Explain. Tidal effects from Crixus 7's moons, Vox theorized. They've aligned, creating a powerful gravitational pull that's affecting the liquid dynamics of the swamp. The current toward our destination has intensified. On her isolated log, Elena had reached the same conclusion. The violently spinning vortex was actually part of a massive acceleration in the swamp's flow, directly toward their extraction point. If they could harness this flow, rather than fight it, they might reach their destination much faster than anticipated. She untied the vine from her waist and began to fashion it into a crude steering mechanism for her log, using techniques learned in Earth's whitewater rapids. With careful manipulation, she managed to guide her makeshift craft out of the vortex and into the main current, which carried her swiftly toward the extraction point. From the bridge, the Alliance team watched in astonishment as the human sergeant, rather than being swallowed by the swamp, began to navigate its treacherous currents with primitive but effective technique. She's utilizing the natural flow, Mur observed with newfound respect. Adapting to the environment rather than attempting to overcome it. Captain Thoran's crystalline features shifted in what might have been admiration. Can we employ the same method? Engineer Vox was already organizing the remaining logs. If we create smaller, more maneuverable rafts, rather than attempting to maintain a single bridge structure, we can navigate the current as Sergeant Reyes is demonstrating. Within minutes, the Alliance team had reconfigured their resources, creating a fleet of small rafts lashed together in a loose convoy. Following Elena's example, they used long poles cut from the acid-resistant trees to steer their crafts into the accelerated current. The journey that would have taken another day of bridge building was completed in less than 2 hours, as the swamp itself carried them toward their destination. By midday, the entire strike team had reached the solid ground of the extraction point, muddy, exhausted, but alive. Elena, her environmental suit in tatters and her skin showing angry red burns from toxic exposure, was the last to step onto solid ground. The floating log that had carried her to safety sank slowly into the swamp behind her, as if its purpose had been fulfilled. Captain Thoran approached her, his crystalline form towering over her human frame. For a moment, he simply observed her, then executed a formal Herrick salute, a gesture normally reserved for warriors of exceptional valor. Your primitive methods proved effective. Sergeant Reyes, he acknowledged, his tone lacking its previous derision. The Alliance strike team owes its survival to your unconventional approach. Elena returned the salute, fighting to remain standing despite her exhaustion and injuries. Just adaptation, Captain. Using what's available to solve the problem at hand. The emergency beacon at the extraction point, hardened against electromagnetic interference, had remained functional throughout their ordeal. Within hours, an Alliance rescue vessel descended through Crixus 7's turbulent atmosphere, its advanced shields parting the toxic mists like a blade. As the team boarded the vessel, Elena noticed a change in how her alien companions regarded her. Where once there had been dismissal or barely concealed contempt for her primitive human nature, Now, there was something approaching respect. Even the Altari, whose civilization had achieved interstellar travel when humans were still crafting stone tools, nodded acknowledgement as she passed. In the medical bay of the rescue vessel, as automated systems treated her toxic exposure and burn injuries, Elena received a transmission from Alliance High Command. The message was brief, but unprecedented. A formal commendation from the Galactic Council, recognizing her innovative utilization of indigenous resources in a critical situation. More meaningful than the official recognition, however, was the message that followed from Captain Thuran. Your bridge strategy has been incorporated into Alliance emergency protocols. All strike teams will now receive training in what we are calling adaptive resource utilization. Your primitive wisdom has become Alliance doctrine. Sergeant Reyes. Elena smiled through cracked lips as the medical bay's regeneration field began to repair her damaged tissues. The floating bridge, a solution so simple that her alien companions had initially laughed at its suggestion, had become a symbol of humanity's unique contribution to the Galactic Alliance. Not advanced technology or overwhelming firepower, but adaptability, resourcefulness, and the ancient wisdom that sometimes the oldest solutions were still the best. 6 standard months later, Elena stood at attention before the Galactic Council chamber on Nexus Prime, the administrative heart of the Alliance. Representatives of 27 spacefaring civilizations observed as she received the Order of Adaptive Excellence, a newly created commendation inspired by the events on Crixus 7. Sergeant Elena Reyes, intoned the council speaker, a Herrick elder whose crystalline form glittered with embedded data nodes. Your actions on Crixus 7 exemplify the core principle upon which this alliance was founded. That diversity of approach creates resilience against all threats. Where advanced technology failed, your application of fundamental natural principles succeeded. The speaker gestured toward a holographic display showing the floating bridge concept, now refined and integrated into Alliance tactical training. This solution, elegant in its simplicity, has already saved 3 additional strike teams in similarly compromised environments. More importantly, it has reminded us all that true advancement comes not from abandoning our evolutionary heritage, but from honoring the wisdom contained within it. As Elena accepted the commendation, she saw Captain Thuran among the assembled dignitaries. The Herrick warrior inclined his crystalline head slightly, a gesture of profound respect from his species. Beside him stood Mur and Vox, both fully recovered from their ordeal, and now serving as instructors in the new Adaptive Tactics Division of Alliance Training Command. The bridge you built on Crixus 7 connected more than 2 points of land. Sergeant Reyes, the council speaker concluded, it built a bridge between technological advancement and fundamental wisdom, between disparate species and common purpose. For this, the Alliance honors you. The chamber erupted in the diverse sounds of multi-species approval, crystalline resonance from the Herrick, bioluminescent pulses from the Altari, rhythmic limb tapping from the Yadari, and many others beyond human description. Elena stood tall in her dress uniform, the weight of Nexus Prime's gravity comfortably familiar to her Earth-adapted physiology. The commendation she'd received would advance her career significantly, opening doors previously closed to human representatives in the Alliance hierarchy. But more meaningful than any official recognition was the knowledge that somewhere in the galaxy, a team of diverse beings in desperate circumstances might now survive because of a simple solution inspired by Earth's ancient technologies. A floating bridge of logs, a testament to the enduring value of primitive wisdom in an advanced age. As the ceremony concluded and the gathered dignitaries dispersed to their various duties, Elena found herself approached by a group of young cadets, representatives of various Alliance species, undergoing their initial training. Sergeant Reyes, said a junior Herrick officer, his crystalline features not yet fully matured. We are assigned to study your Crixus 7 solution as part of our tactical training. Would you honor us by explaining the conceptual foundation of your approach? Our instructors suggest it represents a fundamental philosophical difference in problem-solving methodology. Elena smiled at the earnest young officer and his companions. It's actually quite simple, she explained. Throughout human history, we've learned that sometimes the most elegant solutions aren't about forcing your will upon the environment, but about finding ways to work with it. The floating bridge succeeded not because we conquered the swamp, but because we found a way to move with it rather than against it. The cadets listened with rapt attention, recording her words for a later study. Elena realized that this, perhaps, was humanity's greatest contribution to the Galactic Alliance, not advanced technology or superior weaponry, but a perspective shaped by millennia of adaptation to a challenging world. A reminder that sometimes the oldest wisdom was still the most valuable. As the group moved toward the lecture halls where Elena would provide a more detailed briefing on primitive survival techniques, she glanced back at the holographic display still showing the floating bridge. In the sophisticated council chamber of the most advanced civilizations in the known galaxy, this simple construction of logs and vines seemed oddly at home, a bridge not just across a toxic swamp, but across the vast evolutionary distances that separated the Alliance's diverse members. It was, she reflected, a reminder that true advancement came not from discarding the past, but from carrying its wisdom forward into the future, a lesson as relevant in the star-spanning Galactic Alliance as it had been in humanity's earliest days on Earth. The floating bridge had saved more than a stranded strike team. It had reminded the galaxy's most advanced beings that sometimes the simplest solutions were still the best.